All right, and we're live. So, welcome back to Heller Barnes. And we have that flake, no good capitalist pig called Johnny Heller, who is off recording for a major publisher. And they called him in and said, no, you have to come in and do it rather than working from home. So, he is off today. He's off today from the show, and he is out having doing what he should be doing. That's narrating for a major publisher there in New York. So, good for him. Good for him. And so what we decided to do is, so I have a guest with me called Donny Baarns, who is one of the things I consider him me version 2 or version 6.0, where the thing that all of us parents, you all go through it. He's a parent now. He gets this. The dream and the whole early life is you want your kids to turn out better than you. Well, that was such a low bar. It worked in spades. It's been fantastic. And in so many ways, at age, Donnie's 40 and I'm in my 60s. And what it turns around, for those of you who haven't been there, many of you are there, um, your children become your mentors in some areas. And he is an inspiration to me. And it's one of those things where today he's one of my peers. We trade information, and it is funny. We wear these different hats, and some days he's my coach in some areas and I'm his coach in other areas, and we trade information. And now he's a young parent, and so there's that connection there where he sees what his mom went through, all that stuff. So you have your kids, you're doing that same thing. So Donnie, welcome to the show. Super glad to have you here after a year of us doing this. How you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. I know I'm pretty sure the publishing house specifically told Johnny that he could not join you today. That was a very personal barb directed at you, and you should take it as such. But I'm honored to fill in. Obviously, big shoes to fill with Johnny being gone. But yeah, I have to say I don't feel very young today. I don't feel like a very young parent today because our daughter, who's closing in on 2, uh, decided at a little after 4 this morning that she was going to be awake, and, that was just how it was. She wasn't mad, she wasn't sick, she wasn't upset, she was actually super happy to be awake and ready to play and eat, and she wanted to do all the things. So I've been up since a little after 4, and so I have my energy beverage here. So cheers, everyone.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to do something unusual today. So, just for a backstory, if it wasn't for Donnie, I would never have been in this business. Or I shouldn't say never, but I probably wouldn't have been. He was doing sports broadcasting back in the early days, minor league baseball, triple A team, double A team, single A team. I don't remember, but I don't even
All
remember
of the
which
above.
baseball team. What is that?
All of the above,
All
pretty
of the
much.
above. So what happened was he was sports broadcasting, and it turns out that he discovered audiobooks before we did. Well, I didn't even know it was a thing. I had listened to books on tape years before that, and he knew that I had a recording background. I had a music background. He knew that I had recorded when I was younger, and he started doing an audiobook before. I mean, I didn't even know what it was, and he said, "Hey, you and Mom would be really good at this because you could do the engineering." And mom would be the talent, is really what he said to summarize that, because he knew I wasn't going to be the talent. Um, and what happened was his first, I'm going to say a dozen, but you can correct me if I'm wrong there. In the beginning, Donnie was working with Audacity, and I didn't even know what a DAW was. I had recorded in a major recording studio when I was much younger. So I understood the principles of recording and listening. He's heard music and high-end music stuff his whole life because we were really into that. But I hadn't recorded with the modern DAW, so he calls me one day and says, "Okay, I could use some help with this stuff." And he said, "I'm using this thing called Audacity," and I'm like, "I don't know what that is." And anyways, he introduced us to audiobooks, and I ended up being his editor, I think. So if I remember right, Donnie, and we're going back 12 years, so if I get some details wrong, please correct me. When we started off, you were doing all your recording, and then if I remember, we established a Google Drive, and you would send me 100% of your raw audio, and I did all the editing. And I don't think the first 3 years, 5 years, I don't know what it was, something in there. I did 98% of your editing. You produced both audiobooks and voiceovers, and then sent them to me, and I did all the editing on that. Is that correct? Close?
I think it was the first 3 years or so because I was doing stuff pretty sporadically those first few years before I really got into voiceover, you could say full time in about 2016. So, yeah, I was sending everything to you, and we were like you said, originally, we were doing everything in Audacity, we were not doing punch and roll, I had no idea what that was. So you were the person that eventually brought me Studio One and said, "We need to transition over to this, and we need to learn this punch and roll thing," and I was very unhappy with you temporarily with that because it was by that point, I was used to Audacity, I knew how Audacity worked. I'd been using Audacity even since, probably for several years before that because that was what I used to edit my pregame interviews that I would record for the minor league baseball team. So you have like the 15-minute pregame show before every game, and I would do an interview every day, and I would edit it in Audacity. So I'd been using Audacity for a half a decade at least at that point. And so yeah, I didn't want to change to something else. Why would we do that?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, learning not just Studio One, but learning how to punch and roll in it, and I eventually got very fast at it because I had to when I started actually getting lots of voiceover work and I was still doing baseball every day. So I had very short windows of time to record every day. So that's kind of how it's persisted ever since. I have to get stuff done fast. And so being able to record and well, being able to record punch and roll and having basically zero editing to do afterward because I hit one button and it's mastered and then I drag it into Isotope RX, hit one button for the custom stack that you've set up for me years ago, and then export it, and it's done. So that really is how it has to be for me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to have a voiceover career.
Well, I'm going to give people some perspective in terms of I have a highlight reel to show where you're doing some sports broadcasting. And one of the things Donnie also has done because he was working, he did some Major League Baseball things, some minor league baseball things, and he was introduced to the voice coaches for the sports broadcasters around the world. And I remember you had a throat. You were broadcasting so much, and there would be some days where it would be 2 to 4 hours worth of on mic, not including your voiceover stuff before and afterward. And so you were able to tap into, because of your contacts, there's only what, two, three people in the world that work with the major league, but for baseball, major league broadcasters. Is that close?
I mean, there's a handful of voice coaches now that work with high level broadcast talent, but when I first started having voice issues in about 2012. It was right before I got into audiobooks, but yeah, when you do baseball, especially minor league baseball, you're on the air by yourself for around 4 hours every night for 5 to 6 months straight. There are almost no off days in baseball, and those who follow baseball, now they have a pitch clock at all levels, so the games have actually sped up a lot the last few years. I was in it when they didn't have that, and the games were at the slowest that they'd ever been, so games really dragged back then, and I was on the air by myself for hours and hours every night. And then I also, with that minor league team, I had to sell sponsorships. I had to sell group outings. I had to update the website, send out press releases. So I would work all day, and they didn't really care how I broadcast. They only cared if you sold. It was sell or perish. So it was a very high pressure job. And then you had to go on the air every night and not sound like an idiot, hopefully. And of course, that's what you're trying to advance in and actually be good at after you've done everything else. So it was massively stressful. And by about 4 years into it, I had developed I found out such severe acid reflux that I was losing my voice, and so I had to make a lot of changes health-wise, lifestyle-wise, and so yeah, I've worked a lot on my voice and learned a lot about the voice since then because I was kinda scared straight, fortunately, at a young age, and, so yeah, I've worked with a lot of voice coaches and, I haven't been to an ear, nose, and throat doctor in a long time, fortunately, because I haven't had to be, but yeah, I've worked with a lot of voice coaches over the years.
Okay. And I do know, we'll talk about this. There's this thing you use now called a nebulizer. Is that close?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll show
Yeah,
it. Do you want to? Do you want? But
it's yeah, it's this guy. This particular one is called let's see if I can turn it toward the camera. There it is. This particular one is called a vocal mist. There are, full disclosure, there are other portable nebulizers you can get on Amazon. The ones that I've gotten have broken really quickly. This one I've had to reorder once or twice too because these portable nebulizers are fragile things. You're dealing with basically there's a 0.9% saline solution water packet that goes in the top of each of these, and then it nebulizes, which means it mists. I gotta hold it so you can see that. So it mists, and that 0.9% saline solution, actually, it's that exact percentage because supposedly it mimics your own saliva. That's the same salt percentage that your saliva has, or that your mucus has, I guess. And so when you inhale this, it goes obviously directly into your voice box, your larynx, which a lot of times we don't. I think most of us who use our voice professionally understand that when we drink tea or drink anything that feels kind of soothing, it doesn't actually touch our vocal cords, right? If it did, that'd be a problem. That's when you splutter and cough because they sit right above your lungs. Nothing is actually supposed to get in there. So you can drink and drink and drink all kinds of water and other liquids and trying to stay hydrated. There's no guarantee it actually reaches your vocal folds, and it takes hours for it to do that if it does. So, with a nebulizer, you can breathe in directly into your vocal folds in a way that's not harmful, and it rehydrates your voice immediately. And it's really helped me get through some times where my voice was starting to feel tired. A lot of times I do it proactively before I broadcast a game now. It makes I feel a lot stronger vocally when I use it, both before and after a long session or a long game. So that's been a nice addition to the arsenal over the last couple of years. And just generally trying to stay healthy, trying to exercise, learning what I need to do when I feel myself getting sick to try to head it off or at least blunt it so that my voice isn't affected for too long, hopefully. It's a constant thing as most people know who do this professionally.
Well, let me give a couple examples here. So I'm going to show a highlight reel of him with sports broadcasting. And the one thing that if I'm doing an audiobook, you're going to have a scene which is intense and you know it's coming up and you can plan for it. And if you don't like it, you can redo it. So if you had a day where, hey, I really can't be super big that day, you might be able to go up, down, whatever, and you can do it again. Now, when you're live broadcasting, and there is a goal or there is a home run or there is something else, you better be in that moment because you have that one moment to do it. And you kind of, I'm going to guess, you don't worry about your vocal cords while you're there in the middle of a game. You kind of, maybe it's in the back of your mind, but you can't deal with that. So let me show you a couple examples. I could show thousands of these examples, but I'm just going to show one and not have it go too long, and I'll skip around in it so you can get an idea of what's going on here. So here we go.
That might not come again and certainly won't look exactly the same if and when it does. One group of players seeking to add to their legend, another trying to create a new status of their own. We had to wait a bit.
I'm not hearing the audio.
Let's enjoy history together. We are in motion in Miami, Argentina and Colombia in the Copa America final of Angel Di Maria. In low, Messi hit bodies in front, deflects to Vargas. Taken off his toes by Lerma.
So I just want to make sure that you guys can hear that. I believe, even though Donny won't on our back channel, I've got that feeding through the audio of the, and so just make sure. So someone throw a little comment in there and let me know that you are hearing that, okay? So what's happened is, I don't know much about Copa America. First off, this is embarrassing, but his dad is one of the most ignorant people on the planet when it comes to football or soccer. And so, oh, you could hear it. Great. Okay. So,
Cool.
So as long as you guys are hearing it, Donny won't hear it over our back channel feed. And then you'll hear here that when something's scored, he gets to be his big self here.
And Diaz is going to track this. Luis Diaz on the run. And showed too much of the ball to Christian Romero. Mojica, though. And Lerma. Lerma accelerates around one. Jefferson Lerma just wide. It was a rocket. And it wasn't far away. Messi delivers. Great ball. It's over the bar. Luis Diaz. And James. James clipped to the penalty spot. Headed backside. Arias just wide. Santiago Arias has never scored for Colombia in 60 appearances. Rarely come closer than he did there. Yes. Arias across the way, intended for Rios. Falls to Santiago Arias instead. Now Richard Rios. Rios tried to scoop it into the middle. Came off the defender. That was Tagliafico. It's shielded out by Arias. It will be a corner. And Messi is down again for Argentina. And will that be the end of the line for him tonight?
So I could first off, let me play one other thing just so you get a perspective here, and that's a little voiceover. WebMD. WebMD used to have their internal staff recording things, and at some point they decided to go. They decided to hire some professionals because their internal staff was doing it. And this is just an example. He has thousands of these, but here's one of them.
COVID-19 pandemic began, there's been lots of buzz about covering your face. Here's the truth about face masks. I'm not sick. Should I have to wear a face mask? Yes. COVID-19 can be spread by people with no symptoms who don't even know they're sick.
So Donny has just done, it's crazy number of baseball, crazy number of pro soccer. Tell Copa America. Oh, this is the weird thing. If you're in the United States or Canada, I believe, then their Fox broadcasters are the voices you are going to hear. Is that correct, Donnie?
In the United States, yeah. So I was on the what's known as the world feed for the Copa America tournament this last summer. So yeah, we don't think about it in the US, but most big sporting events have the American feed and then the world feed. So even like the World Series, you turn it's on Fox in the US, but there are people calling the world feed that goes out to the rest of the world because Fox only broadcasts in the US for the most part, and they have properties in other countries. But the world feed gets picked up by networks in other parts of the world. So yes, I was on the world feed this last summer. A lot of the international soccer I do is for the world feed. So ironically, most Americans don't hear me, but people in other parts of the world do, which is interesting because soccer fans in other parts of the world are very prejudiced toward American voices on soccer. They hear an American accent and they immediately assume that you know nothing about the sport and they hate you right away. So it's it's been an interesting thing to be part of, but I love it. Soccer for me is one of my biggest passions, and I love especially when you get to do high level games like that with big crowds and big energy. I'm calling them remotely off a screen. We call those from a studio. So you're not at the stadium most of the time, but you still feel the energy. You still get to see all the camera angles. You hear everything in your headphones. So and it's a big adrenaline rush, especially when you get to call a game that involves players like Lionel Messi. And so yeah, super fun, but it's an interesting performance thing because, like you said, there are no retakes. There's no punch and roll with
Yep.
live sports broadcasting. What you say is what it is, and you don't get to go back and redo it. I've compared it to if you're into painting at all, there's a style of painting called fresco, where there's a fresh sheet of plaster put up, and then you have to paint it before it dries, and once it dries, that's it. That's what it is. You don't get to go back and retouch it. So sports broadcasting is kind of like that. It's live, you're out on a cliff, you're out on a wire, and it takes a long time to really get good at it for most of us, and to develop an editorial sense internally for what you should say, what you shouldn't, where to be really big and proactive, and where to let the game and the crowd breathe and be silent. Similar to music too. A lot of times you overplay when you're a young musician, and then you develop much better feel and taste as you get older. Live broadcasting is the same. So it's an art form. It's a different art form from voiceover, but there's a lot that crosses over as well. So I love both.
Well, and so sometimes you come home so you go broadcast, and then you come home, and then you have what, 2 to 5 voiceovers sitting there waiting to go. Is that close?
Sometimes, yes, sometimes it depends on the day, but yes, there are times where I've gotten back because I have to drive. The studios that centralize these soccer broadcasts are a several-hour drive from my house in Central Florida. So a lot of times I get back at 2 or 3 in the morning, and then sometimes I still have to do voiceover stuff when I get back. So again, that's where punch and roll, being able to get stuff out fast really, really helps me, because I would not have I don't think I would have the wherewithal to spend hours editing on top of the recording, the
Well,
performance
okay.
aspect.
Yeah, and I know some insider secrets here. When you record, you generally do kind of one take from beginning to end, but stopping and as a punch. So you make a mistake, you stop, you punch in and continue. And by the time you're done, that thing is as best you know perfect in terms of to the script. Correct?
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll do it twice if it's my first of the day. A lot of times I'll record something twice just to get in the flow of it. After that, the rest of the day, a lot of times I do one take. It depends, but
Okay.
yeah, I try to do it in one if I can.
Yeah. Now, for those of you that are newer, like, I could not do that simply because, one, I don't sight read as well as Donnie does. Donnie could read a script and he'll be 99% accurate plus, reading whatever's there the first time through, and I am probably 1 out of 6. Like, I'd have to do it 6 times to get to his level, but when you've done and last time I counted this, by the way, we're going back approximately I think you were still in Omaha last time I counted, and I knew at that point when we were starting to do the math and I'm looking at his drives and I'm starting to figure out and I'm like, holy moly, you've done like 18,000 voiceovers so far. And because I looked at his stuff and we started going, well, let's see, back this started 10 years ago and we went, and now I just say he's north of 15,000, even though I know intellectually, last time I stopped counting was about approximately 3 years ago and he continues to do crazy numbers of them. I know you're over 20, but it's just if somebody doesn't believe me at 15,000, then they're not going to believe me at 20,000. So it's just so, but this
Yeah,
guy is just,
depends how you count. If you count all the ones I did when I was doing minor league baseball, then yeah, maybe around that range.
yeah,
Yeah, since I've been doing it full time, I don't know, it's probably closer to 14 or so,
okay.
somewhere in that range.
Okay. So this guy, anyway, he just does a lot. So let's just say round it down to 10,000. Most of us, and when you've done 10,000 of anything, then you have a different set, a different path. And I don't recommend that most people that are brand new figure out that they're going to do it once. There are times today, based on doing over 10,000, 15,000 of these things plus, and sometimes you'll have, two versions of something. Then he doesn't even listen to it back in some situations, and he throws it in RX, which does his post-production, and he has everything set up in advance. So how many buttons do you press once it's in RX in order to have it do its processing?
1.
Okay. And did you create that?
No, I did not.
Okay.
No, you did.
Okay.
I may have tweaked it slightly since, but no, you set all that up, and
Well,
that's been the case for every room that I've had, every studio that I've had, going back to my first one, my first walk-in closet. They've been
yeah,
in
we started in a
several closets over the years.
yeah, yeah. Well, and you still haven't come out of the closet, so it's still
Yeah,
you're in
still
you're in a
this is the closet now that we converted, yeah.
yeah. But this first one that I remember you having was a very shallow closet in an apartment, and you had to stand. And if I remember right, you had a blanket that we attached to the ceiling, and could put that behind you, and you stood in
Mhm.
there with a blanket that hung behind you, and we had put some treatment inside the room, and so essentially you were you had a blanket fort sort of
Mhm.
type setup.
Yeah,
Also,
it was technically a linen closet, I guess that's what they call them, so it was right by the door of this apartment. Fortunately, it was a 3rd floor walk up, and it was in one of the quieter corners of that apartment complex. It was really providential, actually. If I had happened to be put in the building to the left, that was right next to the train tracks, and it was really loud there a lot of times.
yeah.
So, I
Well,
was really fortunate where I was location-wise for that. But, yeah, it was a shallow linen closet. It had one little wire shelf that I set the screen on. I actually yeah, I treated that room by myself. You consulted from a distance. But, yeah, I went to the Goodwill store and bought a couple of quilts and some finishing nails and a couple pillows, and I tacked stuff to all the walls. What I was proudest of, my big design element with that one was I bought some of those plastic hooks that have the little stickum things on the back, and so I stuck 2 hooks above the door frame and then another hook on the wall to the right, and I cut little slits in the top of the blanket that I hung down behind me so I could hang the blanket from the 2 hooks in front of the door frame, and if I wanted to, I could unhook it on one side and hook it onto the other wall if I wanted it to be out of the way. So that was a big design innovation. It was very sophisticated, very slick.
Well, you know what? Especially 'cause back in the day, first off, it sounded great. That's not something you would have shown professionally to, like, today as an agent and all. I that would that would have
Yeah,
not
I didn't do any video back in those days with it would have been embarrassing, yeah.
Yeah, but the point is sometimes that still can work and that can get you started, and it doesn't have to be the perfect look to get started. It had to sound great, and a combination of good microphones, good equipment, decent, above average stuff, along with, good tools over time ends up taking care of an awful lot of stuff. And then at some point, you get to the point where when you were on the road sports broadcasting, so you'd be doing a baseball game and you would be on the road, you'd have a voiceover come in. So how'd you handle that?
Yeah, that was where I had to really learn how to use RX when I would travel. When I got to Omaha, I got into college basketball and other college sports, so I was traveling a lot with those teams, and I mean, people know if you try to record in a hotel room, you never know what you're going to get, but oftentimes it's not good. It's just a the
That's a
only question
technical
is how
term.
bad it's going. Yeah, the only question when you're in a hotel room is how bad is it going to be, and how close to those massive rooftop AC units are you going to be? And so obviously we all know there's certain ambient noises you can't do anything about. If the staff is cleaning the room next to you and running the vacuum cleaner and banging stuff and being loud, you're just going to have to wait. If there's an airplane flying overhead, you're just going to have to wait. But for those steady ambient noises like AC units, heaters, refrigerators, I'm compulsive. My wife will tell you the first thing I do when we get in a hotel room is I'm like, "Where is the plug for the room refrigerator, and how can I unplug it?" Because occasionally they hide those plugs behind a really heavy piece of furniture, and yeah, I have to, like, physically move the entertainment unit or whatever it is so I can get to the plug and unplug it so it will stop buzzing and humming.
Right.
And, yeah, so I've looked a little unhinged sometimes getting to the refrigerator plug in a hotel room. But yeah, gotta unplug that. That's the first thing I do in any hotel room. And then it's just assessing how much hum is there from the AC or the heating units, and how do we take that out with RX. So I had to learn that. I've gotten pretty good at it
Yeah.
thanks to your help and tutelage, but it was very stressful at first.
Yeah, and I do remember you sending me stuff at some points when you were at some locations. Both while you were learning it, you would send me something to evaluate it. Sometimes I would do it differently and send it back to you. Sometimes you didn't have time because you were stressed and you had four voiceovers to do, and you just sent them to me. And I was back in the day, I would be processing them and send them back to you. And you got to the point where this guy doesn't have to call me for anything anymore. And while I wouldn't say you're an expert in RX. From a noise reduction point of view and a de-reverb point of view. Also, he forced me to figure out the original de-reverb tool in RX, which
That's
I
right.
was not. I tried it a few times, and I said, "Oh, this doesn't work very well." And then over time, because he would go into these rooms and there would be way too much reverb, I did figure out how to make that thing work very effectively. And today, if you have RX10, RX11, and specifically, there is a world-class de-reverb tool in it that we can use, and then it's easy. Anybody could do this. But in the day, we had to learn, go back 5 years ago, we had to really dig in on the tools and be excellent with the noise reduction tools, excellent with the spot noise reduction tools. He's a terror at spectral repair, and because you just come up with all this stuff. Now, none of this stuff, although, hey, since you have a child now, do you ever have to use RX to take out something from Junie?
No, fortunately, this closet isn't a good part of the house where, if they're downstairs, not a lot gets through here from there. So, yeah, that worked out very well. Really, the main challenge with Junie is just staying healthy and not getting sick repeatedly, which is much easier said than done. One of the things they don't tell you about becoming a parent is that once your kid goes to preschool or daycare in any fashion, um, it's like when when suddenly you're added or you're subscribed to some email list or some club that you never signed up for. Apparently, when your kid starts going to preschool, you get signed to the virus of the month club, which nobody told you about it. Like, it's in the fine print, and you just didn't notice. So yeah, she's bringing home a new sickness every few weeks, and you're just trying to avoid that. But yeah, fortunately, the sound aspect isn't too bad now that we've fortified this room in here. But
Yeah,
other places I've been in, it would have been a much bigger problem for sure.
yeah,
But yeah, traveling was very stressful for a long time before I really knew how to handle it. I remember one of the first road trips I went on with broadcasting after I'd started doing voiceover full time as well. I was so nervous beforehand how I was going to deal with it. And then we got to the hotel. It was this nice hotel in Memphis, Tennessee. And Memphis is a big blues town. And so it was this hotel that overlooked sort of a not really a courtyard, it was a public park actually. And it turned out we got there in the middle of the day after an early morning flight, and there was this big jazz festival and a whole food truck festival in the park right across from my hotel room. And one of my one of my regular clients in those early days who would feed me orders a lot of times every day. This particular day, he literally needed 15 different voiceovers from me that day, which he'd never done before. And I was so stressed. This is it. My career's over. I'm never going to be able to do this. There's way too much noise. None of this is going to work. So yeah, we made it work. I was up very late that night.
yeah. Well, that's normal. That's a good thing. And so I know audiobooks these days are not something that you do because for a lot of different reasons. But I think voiceover, you're doing so much, there's no reason to take a project that could take you 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Um, you
I've done a
know,
couple in the last year. Every now and then, I will take one if they're actually willing to pay decently and I like the book.
hmm
So I have done a couple recently, but not often. Yeah, and usually I only commit to books that are relatively short, maybe in the 30 to 50,000 word range. I usually don't venture outside that because yeah, I don't have the time or the energy to record super long audiobooks these days in most cases. I'm always open to it, but it's not my primary focus.
Now, Ray just asked an interesting question here regarding Virus of the Month Club, Donnie. Do you ever get knocked out of action vocally for a week or two?
Not totally out of action. My voice definitely I've had colds and viruses where my voice was certainly impacted for a couple weeks. I had a really bad one about 2 years ago. I think that was when I finally got COVID for the first time. I'm still not sure because I never tested positive actually, but it was one of the worst sicknesses I'd had, and even after I felt better, my voice was still really weak for another month or so after that. So that was definitely where having a nebulizer helped a lot. Um, I do find that either strengthens or helps my voice recover afterward enough to where I can get through a session. And I make broth a lot. I make chicken broth at home, which is one of those things that if you're on our email list, I've sent out my recipe for it. It's one of those things that sounds very sophisticated and difficult, and people think they can never do it. And then once you learn how to do it, it's very simple. You just have to get a chicken and some vegetables and do it.
Yeah.
And it's really good for you, and I find it really helps head off a lot of stuff. I'll make soup then once I have the broth made. You can use it on all kinds of other stuff. It's very useful to have in general. And it's super good for you, whether it actually prevents colds or not, whether it's partly psychological or placebo, I don't know, but it seems to help me. This is not medical advice. I'm not a doctor.
You did play
At
one
the,
on WebMD though.
I
And
did, yes, yes, but yes, we have to add the medical disclaimer. This is not medical advice or legal advice or financial advice, but
yeah,
chicken
well,
broth,
here's the
you
thing
can
that
make it
I
at home,
know
it does help.
that that if you have I don't remember you canceling many gigs. Like if you just because of your background doing it enough and making sure you're taking care of yourself from a health perspective best you can. Doing the nebulizer, which you definitely do. And by the way, those nebulizers, they're not cheap, are they? I think they're quote unquote, this is the funny thing. At first, they're not cheap. What, 120 bucks, 150 bucks, 200
I
bucks?
think the first time you get this one, it's about 120 if you get it with the saline water packets. Now you can, like I've said, you can find on Amazon cheaper ones where you have to order the nebulizer and the water, the saline solution separately. You can spend less. I've tried a couple of those and they've broken on me right away. Again, these portable nebulizers, they're fragile. They just are because you're dealing with small little machinery and then there's water and salt. And if you're taking them with you all the time, which I do, I take them with me to games when I travel. So, they're getting turned upside down. You do have to clean them routinely. And yeah, over time they break down and sometimes they break down sooner than you'd like. It's one of those annoying things, but overall they're well worth it, whether you get the vocal mist or some other model. If you can find one that works better for you, great. I haven't found one that holds up longer than the vocal mist, even though sometimes the vocal mist breaks down too. But it's just cost of doing business for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes sense. I mean, for most of us, also for most people, if you're not traveling, it means if you got a good one, then you're
Mhm.
probably going to be able to keep it for a couple years. And I think you even have a an affiliate link for that thing, don't you?
I do have an affiliate link, yes. I
Okay.
think I sent that to you earlier, so yeah, if
Okay.
people wanna if you wanna buy it, if you wanna try it out, sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll get,
Anyway,
like,
just so you
I'll get,
know.
like, $5 for you doing it, but hey, every bit helps,
Yeah.
especially when you have a child
Yeah.
who must be fed.
Yeah. Well, I think yes. Yeah, I've had some experience with that occasionally. Um,
No, have you?
so, so what? So, how's AI affecting your business? Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely impacted the market. Um, I think it's taken some of the market. The question will be how much will it take long term? But I'm trying to find ways to use it in my business. I'm still early in that process. I'm trying to figure out, can I, obviously, AI voices, I'm not a fan of, but they are what they are. They're inevitable. There's nothing we can do to stop them. Obviously, I know that organizations like NAVA are doing great work. National Association of Voice Actors, if you're not familiar, are doing great work trying to get some kind of legal frameworks and protections in place so that people aren't just stealing and ripping off our voices with no repercussions. So certainly applaud them and hope they're able to continue to succeed in doing that. Also, like voiceover attorneys like Rob Sigling Paglia, great resource for understanding your rights around AI and how to try to protect yourself from those things. But AI in general is not something that I'm going to run from, especially where it can help with business things. If there are ways that I can figure out how to have it try to automate my outreach or automate certain things, certain administrative stuff that I have to do every day that just consumes time. And I'm still early in that process and trying to figure out how maybe I could have it help with that or help leverage with that. But I think we have to have a very open mind to it, in that sense at least, once we get outside the AI voices realm and find the other areas where it can be helpful.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I listen. I'm studying it like crazy. I'm be, because of you originally, and I've been going nuts with learning about the big picture. I do have a programming back. Well, this is not news to you. When Donnie was younger, all I was doing was making my living as a programmer before I ever did any voiceover related stuff. And so tech has been part of our life, since he was a little guy. And so AI I see as first off, it misses all sorts of things in storytelling. It misses like I don't know how it would do a live game or a broadcast because it doesn't understand the backstory of the players and who they are and which one is important. And there's a whole
They're
bunch
trying
of
Yeah, they're trying to develop it for broadcasting
are they?
too, believe it or not. Yeah, the way it's been used for translation. That's the way it's been used so far. There was a youth soccer tournament that MLS put on last year where they had, I think, English, maybe Spanish broadcasters doing it,
Uh huh.
but then they had an AI program translating their commentary into a bunch of other languages, which kinda makes sense. I mean, I guess you're probably, if you're in the US, maybe you're not gonna hire somebody from, certain backgrounds to broadcast a game in certain languages. It's still I'm not crazy about that. I still wish they would find a Polish broadcaster if you need the broadcast to be in Polish.
Right.
So they're trying. I hope they never I think it would be very difficult for AI to really be good at sports broadcasting, but I don't count anything out right now. I'm just trying to roll with it the best I can and try to use it the best I can, or see how it can be used, because we can't really.
Yeah, yeah,
r-
yeah,
r-
yeah. Well,
we- we-
I'm just saying I'm doing all sorts of skunk work type projects where I am working on AI in the background to automate things and to understand how it can be used to enhance business. And Donnie and I have talked about it for doing outreach and doing email stuff, and also like I see it as an excellent first draft type tool at this point, where it can help create, first off, it's like most other technologies. If I'm going to have if I don't, but if I had a self-driving car, I still have to give it the direct, like, where do I want to go? I have to give it some input. Otherwise, maybe someday it'll read my mind. That would be scary. But at least for the foreseeable future, all these tools are multipliers, but they also can multiply in the wrong direction if given the wrong input. So how do you create, and they call it prompts. Basically, it's, and so we're not going to get off on an AI discussion here, but point being that AI all by itself isn't going to do anything, but with your input and my input on solving a business problem, managing email, managing appointments, managing a lot of stuff, it can be a big help. And some of it's in its infancy. So we are tracking it like everybody else so that we can both help and guide and figure out what works and what's going to be helpful for most of us are sole proprietorships. We're independent business people, and doing everything is almost impossible. One of the things that I recommend to everybody is have a mentor or a partner or an accountability person. And one of the things that happens, the joy of having an adult child, it's one of those contradictions in terms, but having one of your kids get old enough, is Donnie is my accountability partner. We have a standing on our calendar once a week where we know it's really crappy for me because I know I have to talk to him one day a week, and it's really good. All right. But
Yeah, it's the
I'm going to,
worst.
what's that?
It's the worst. The
It's,
worst thing to have to do. To
yeah.
be obligated to talk to me once a week. I know it's a heavy burden that you carry.
Well, but here's where it's fantastic. We talk about what we want to accomplish over the next week or two, because he is my business partner in terms of all the training stuff for voiceover and tech stuff and Studio One and RX and everything we do in our training business. He's my partner. So we discuss, hey, what are we going to do here? And oh, and see, David, so point being, I have an accountability partner, and we talk once a week, and we talk about what we want to get done, and then we talk about what we did get done and what's on the agenda for the next week. And it's great to have, and we all need that kind of thing, because all by myself, I could decide that I just want to take a nap this afternoon and not get my work done, and that doesn't work. And then David G's got a couple comments here. Um, let's see. I did a promotion for blind pro wrestling play-by-play. Never. I don't know how that works.
Yeah.
But listen,
I have seen there are a couple of blind play-by-play folks, and yeah, I don't know how they do it either, but it's pretty amazing. So certainly be an even bigger challenge than regular play-by-play would
yeah,
be.
yeah,
There
yeah,
are
yeah.
there are a couple people that manage to pull it off. So
And
yeah,
AI is the devil incarnate. Well, I'm gonna guess though. First off, I'm agnostic on it in that I'm not happy about it in a whole bunch of areas, but I'm also not
yeah,
going to it to be the same as the transition. I hate. Imagine if my grandfather. Let's see. Let me go back. My great grandfather, I believe, big grandfather. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Was a cobbler, made shoes. I know because my grandfather showed me my first pair of shoes, which is made by my great grandfather, who made, and so he probably thinks Nike, if he were around today, he would not be happy with Nike having a factory to crank these things out. And so I don't know anybody that, unless maybe you're ultra wealthy, I don't know anybody that gets custom made shoes, handmade shoes anymore. Maybe somebody does. So all the automation that's taken away my great grandfather's shoe business would have not made him happy. AI is a much bigger threat across the whole range of things, but I believe we will adapt. And you all have heard my story about being a young drummer and drum machines coming in, and us really, we thought it was the devil incarnate. And today, for those of my peers that stuck it out, I did not. They are they're busier today than they were back when we were young guys and there was tons of work for young drummers. It's gone full cycle where, yes, you can do unbelievable things with the current technology and never need a drummer. A keyboard player could do it all, but they still, all the major stuff these days, not all, but amazing amounts are being done that require live drummers. And I believe that AI will do the same full cycle. It will take over certain tasks and it'll leave some other stuff. And even when used well, it does require people who know how to operate it. Um, for all of you who know who Jeff Porcaro is, one of the guys I studied with his dad, he learned to program drum machines back in the day. He was a world-class drummer, and rather than saying like what I did was, oh, these drum machines are awful, he learned to program them so that they would need him to play the live tracks, or they would need him to program them to play. So I do think you
Yeah,
do need to keep an eye on it. I do think you need to watch it and look for where it can help you with some of the business related stuff. And it will take the low hanging fruit. I don't think, and I've already told my wife this, my wife has done hundreds of phone trees. Donnie's mom has done, press 1 to get to the restroom, press 2 to get to the library, press 3 to talk to the CEO. She's just done hundreds of those over her career. And I think all of those will go away because they don't, over the phone, having a fantastic voice is not going to be the thing. And the machines can do it for $5 and a person has to charge $100 to do it, and that's going to go away. All that low hanging fruit. Any
yeah.
comments on that,
I
DB?
Well, you mentioned Jeff Porcaro. I didn't realize till I was watching an interview with Stuart Copeland, the drummer of the Police, years ago. I was watching an interview with him a few months ago. I didn't realize that he figured out how to use guitar pedals to program drum loops and sounds for playing live with the Police. That was in the early '80s. He figured out he said that they'd just gotten all this money from their residuals. They were rich for the first time, so they all went to this famous music shop in New York where they were on tour, and he said that Sting and Andy Summers were buying all these fancy guitars and basses and gear, and he's like, "Well, I'm a drummer, so I wanted to buy something too, so I bought a bunch of guitar pedals, even though I don't play guitar." And then he started tinkering with them and figuring out how he could actually program them to create little layers and textures with his drums. And I didn't realize until then that some of the drum sounds you hear on old Police records were created with some loops and pedals that he was experimenting with. So yeah, people have been using this stuff in some way for a long time. So I don't really like technology. I'm not a big tech guy. I don't enjoy reading instruction manuals. I've never really been into that. I'm not a handy person. I don't I don't fix things around the house. I'm not good at that. I'll try if I have to, but it's not at all my favorite thing to do. I would very much rather that things stayed the same. That's kind of my natural personality. I don't enjoy change. But you do have to try to adapt, and whatever is coming on the scene, you have to try to use or try to see how you could use it to your advantage. So I'm curious now because I spend a lot of time prepping for games. Can I can I figure out a way to program some AI agent that can help me almost create flashcards for players so I can try to memorize what each player looks like before a game so that I could identify them right away when they come on the screen? Are there ways that it could help me prepare for games? I don't know, little things, and I don't know if I'll figure that out or not, but these are questions that I'm asking. How can it help me? How could I leverage it to take care of the things that I don't really love doing or the things that are very tedious to set up at least before I can do the part that I really love? Can I leverage them for that and use them in a way that can be to my advantage? I don't know, but I think that's the mindset you have to have, and it's not a mindset I particularly enjoy, if we're being honest, but I do think it's sort of the obligation of the times that we live in, whether we like it or not. I have all kinds of concerns about AI. But, we can only deal with the day to day and do the best that we can, and I think that's where we are right now.
Well, I'm depending on you to cut it off at the pass, you know?
Yes, it's all on me.
Well, I do agree. Now, so if how would we do that if you were doing books, or it may end up doing prep work. It can summarize things. I don't know. The question is, can it summarize things well, better than a person? But I don't know. Most audiobook narrators are not, unless you're Heller does occasionally. They'll get time starved on a book, where books come back to back to back to back, and he has mentioned that he's never done it with AI, but he's hired people to go ahead and give him a summary of a book and to take, especially a nonfiction, where it will go through and they'll tell him at the beginning of each chapter a summary, so that because he's back to back, wall to wall with projects, sometimes he's had a few books that he didn't have the time to fully read everything before he had to start, because that's the nature of this business if you're busy enough. Now, if you're at the beginning stages, hey, prep your own books, figure out the characters, read the whole thing cover to cover. He did that for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books. And then once he's at a certain point, now he'll hire somebody to do that. Now, will somebody figure out how to do the same sort of book prep with AI? And would it be as good enough? I don't have any clue at this point, although I am trying to figure out how to do it. I am going to figure that out. I'm going to figure out how to do it, just to see, can it be done? Can it be decent? Because if I don't do it, somebody's going to do it, and I'm going to figure it out. So I'm actually doing a lot of study on AI these days. It's my little pet project to understand the big picture, so that I know what we're dealing with, and I can advise my son who has to live with it. Hey, listen, I'm gonna be dead and gone when this AI stuff is, prolific and all over the world, and being something that's part of the day, like a smartphone. Can you imagine when I was a little boy, I could not carry a device in my pocket which would allow me access to anything. So in terms of fixing things, my son, the cheater here, he doesn't even call me to fix things anymore, which he used to do. What does he do? He's much smarter. He goes to YouTube and says, "Okay, my ice maker isn't working properly. What could be the problem?" He doesn't call me to ask. Now, what, by the way, I would have a decent idea because I've had refrigerators my whole life and figured out some of that stuff. But I wouldn't advise him to call me when he can look on YouTube, and chances are he can find the exact model of refrigerator's ice maker that he has, and somebody else has already figured out, oh, this thing breaks once every so often, and here's the major things that break. It's all there. The information is there. The biggest problem is there's so much of it, and maybe AI could give him a summary of, I have this refrigerator, and get me the best videos on fixing my ice maker. And then he doesn't have to call his dad. Now, you can call me for other reasons, but I do see that coming in, where it's getting summaries, it's getting information, and rather than the information overload we're dealing with, have a subsection. What are you looking at there?
Yeah, I mean, it can be good just for generating ideas. I mean, one of the issues with it right now is that it does there are still what they call hallucinations, where it will tell you facts that are just flat wrong. I think they're getting better with that, but it is yeah, you can't just take it whatever it spits out, you can't take it at face value. And yeah, things like ChatGPT still aren't great at writing. I mean, it's good grammatically, but it tends to use a lot of hyperbole, and there are certain words it tends to overuse. So it still requires a lot of human input at this point. It'll keep getting better, I'm sure. But yeah, it's a good way, I think, to generate ideas in the first place when you're sort of stuck on something. Just to ask to prompt it, "Hey, I'm trying to do this. What are some ideas for how to do this?" And it'll throw out maybe 10 of them. 8 of them might not be feasible or work, but maybe one of them is something that you hadn't thought of before. It is incredible how smart it can be at times, even though it's still far from perfect.
Yeah, I do think so. In the old days, when we were writing stuff for the courses and figuring out things, we always had this little concept that it's easier to edit crap than to edit nothing.
Mhm.
And that was one of the things.
Easier to edit crap than air is how it was first told to me, and I've
Okay.
always remembered that, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So all that means, though, the one of the hardest things that I struggle with. By the way, I do a thing in Canva every week. I've not used any of its AI. It does have some AI stuff, but what I do use in Canva, and if I were a graphic artist, Canva's taken away a lot of the graphic artwork because what do? I go get a template, and I get a template that gives me a certain look and feel and a set of fonts that work together. And that's all I do. And then I morph it into something that's for me. So every time I use Canva, I'm starting with one of their templates, because a blank sheet for me, as a, I don't know which font makes any sense with any other font. And they always have, so I look at that and I leverage Canva to do all graphic related stuff. Most of the time we're doing things that don't justify me hiring someone for $500 to put together a complete package and they would make templates. So it's the same thing that's going on. So let's see. Oh, and David's asking another question here. That's good. What's your thoughts on the current voiceover CV overhaul trend? Do you like these full roll studio summary CV designs? Tell me more about that, David. I don't even know what you're talking about. I assume, do you know, Donnie?
I'm not sure what the CV stands
I think
for.
that's a resume in
Okay, resume. I think
like,
that's how they say it in England, yes, the
yes, yes, yes,
CV,
yes.
yeah.
So, in other words, I do think there's a bunch of people that are using AI to help build their website, because AI can build a website in a day. Whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, I don't know. It also can help you build and create the verbiage for your site. Is that close? Uh,
Yeah, and also I think there are some voiceover jobs that do actually ask you to submit a voiceover resume, which is not something we're asked for that often. Some e-learning jobs will ask for a resume or want a resume when you submit to them. So yeah, AI can help you design at least a resume template that makes it much easier to fill out if you don't really have one or you're not a resume designer. Obviously, Word has resume templates too that you can use, but it's all about can you use it to save you some time and at least give you a starting point that stops you from staring at a blank screen for a while at the beginning. I do want to go back to a question that was asked earlier, I think by Ray early in our session about have you ever been knocked out for a week or two with voice issues? One of the things I forgot to mention when we first discussed that, yeah, there it is on the screen. This is a constant worry for voiceover people, and especially when you're early in your career, I think it is kind of the thing in the back of your mind. Like, this is great, but what happens when I get sick and I have clients that want stuff right now? What do I do? What do I tell them? Is that just it? And I remember a voiceover coach early on in my career saying, "Listen, when I'm sick, sometimes I tell the client if it's a recurring client or if it's something where it's a project that needs to be redone or punched in, I might have to let them know, look, my voice is a little different right now. But most of the time, for most projects that come in when I'm sick, I just record it. I find a way to get through it, and I don't say anything." He said, and what I found is that a lot of times clients think your voice sounds cool when you're sick. At least for guys. I don't know how it is for girls, for women. I don't know, but for guys at least, your voice does sound deeper when you're sick. It's not as healthy sounding maybe, but a lot of people can't tell the difference. It's like music. Most people don't have a trained ear. So sometimes in music, people just perceive something that's louder as being better.
right.
And sometimes in voiceover, especially for short projects, sometimes people perceive a deeper voice as sounding better sometimes. So the point is, don't worry about it too much. As long as you can get it out, um, most clients don't notice. Most clients don't notice most things that we think would be obvious to them anyway, and certainly most end listeners usually don't notice. So it's not something that you should be scared of so much. As long as your voice is functional in some way, a lot of clients will actually like how you sound when you're sick. It's one of the things that I didn't expect initially.
Yeah, and I do think that with audiobooks, people don't realize that as long as it's chapter by chapter, you can
Mm,
actually get away with something that where your voice is a little bit different at one point, and most people will not notice it. You'll know, hey, I was sick during that chapter. But remember, it's a new scene, and it
mm.
starts off with a new energy. And every chapter should almost stand alone. It's a part of a narrative. But from a technical point of view and a listening point of view, you can come into it, and if you know you're sick, then what you end up doing is you can use that as a different feel because it's a new scene, and people don't realize, oh, I was sick during that one chapter. It was just that it has the feel of a new scene, a new energy, and you can mostly use that. There is a limit to that whole kind of thing. Um, so, yeah, I like Dave's comment here that he was in Mexico yesterday and he picked up some different things for his medicine cabinet, and so.
This is not medical advice.
Yes.
Disclaimer again.
Okay. And also, Rebecca's saying here, it's easier when it's dual narration with alternating narrators. That's the other thing. So if my voice is a little, first off, most people don't realize this. We got to go here in just a minute, but it's a short term. The memory for how I sound is extremely short. Matter of fact, it's in the seconds. It's less than 10 seconds, which is why when people are comparing two versions of their own voice, if they're listening to 2 minutes of something and then they listen to another 2 minutes, if they only listen, their brain only really captures details about it that are very small, less than 5 seconds. So if you're comparing something, you want to go back and forth in 3-second, 5-second intervals if you're really trying to compare. But takeaway, if I stop for a little bit, I can have a different voice, and most people will not directly remember. We don't have a really great memory for details about what a voice sounds like. And it's when you're switching chapters, it's amazing what you can get away with. I've had people switch mics because a mic broke and nobody's ever noticed. And I go, yeah, okay, there is a difference. I can hear it. But if I was into the story, I wouldn't notice it. So a lot of times, and if you're doing dual narration, by the time somebody comes back to your voice, they don't remember exactly how you voiced a character 6 chapters ago. I mean, even us as pros, we have to go back and look up, how did I voice this voice in chapter 1 when it's chapter 6, because I don't remember the details of that. And a lot of people keep character files and things like that. So it's pretty amazing. Any comments on any of that stuff, DB?
No, I've never actually done a dual narration audiobook, so I don't have experience with that directly. But yeah, I think in general, what you're saying is absolutely accurate. Clients don't remember, listeners don't remember how they're not micro analyzing how your voice sounds or what exactly your timbre is in every moment the way we often think that they are. I
Yep.
mean, within reason, if it's 100% different, maybe they'll notice, but
Yeah.
most things we think are obvious to other people are not at all, and it's not because they're dumb, it's just because we hear ourselves differently, we're conscious of ourselves all the time, and so little changes to us feel like really big changes, and they're just not to most other people that don't hear us every day, so
Yeah.
most of the time, as long as you're not doing long-term damage to your voice, it might be uncomfortable, it's not super fun recording when you're sick, it's not fun doing anything when you're sick. But usually, if you can get through it, use other things to help yourself get through it, most of your clients are gonna be just fine with what you do.
Fantastic. Well, Donnie has a site up there called DonnyVoice.com. You've got other sites there, tvtalent.com/Donny Baarns. If you ever want, for all the promotional stuff, get a hold of me, get a hold of Donnie. Most of you know how to get a hold of us. Yeah, Donnie and Lee and his mom have done tons of dual voice. You don't remember that,
Yeah,
Donnie?
shorter projects, yeah, that's true. We've never done a dual voice audiobook together. We have done the other commercials or shorter voiceover projects with 2 voices, that is very true.
And also, you two, I don't remember you two ever doing one back to back where you're in the same room, or maybe you've done a couple.
We've done it a few times
Yeah.
when she was out here visiting or I was out there visiting where we've stood in the same where we've stood in the same space. Yeah, I think we've probably done that maybe 4 or 5 times over the years. It's rare, but it has happened a couple times.
Okay, but I'll bet you've done a few dozen where she's called you and said, "Hey, I need these 10 lines. Here's the script for the male part of it." Here's
Yeah.
what happens all the time. If she needs a just average man on the street, unprofessional, unpolished voice, I'm her guy. Okay, she does that, and then she needs somebody good to be the other end, comes up a lot more. She calls Donnie and says, "Hey, I got a script for you. Can you do these parts?" And he'll send her back 10 lines, 20 lines, whatever it was. And or if she needs a British, she's doing British and he does his British, and they put it together, and then she puts it all together into one, and they're going back and forth, and at the end of the day it sounds like they were in the same room, but they're 2,000 miles apart doing it separately. They don't hear each other. but they've done enough of them that when you hear the final, you would think they were in the same room. So that's doable too. I forgot about all that stuff. And mostly because Lisa and Donnie over time have gotten to be to the point where they manage 100% of their tech stuff without getting me involved, because it's all been simplified to the point where we're running the same processes all the time. We don't think about it much anymore. 98% of it's, hey, that's all going to be the same. And then we put it together at the end and it sounds great. So any final comments as we go here, Donnie?
Yeah, if you're not on our mailing list, vojumpstart.com, get the 7-day audio challenge, which actually has been extended to 8 days now, but we still call it 7 because that's a more fun number. So yeah, join the mailing list there. We try to send out cool advice, audio tips, motivational content sometimes, just fun stuff.
Cool,
We
cool,
try
cool.
not to make it dry and boring. So yeah, join the mailing list. Of course, we have our courses there, vojumpstart.com, and be excellent to each other and to yourself.
All
As
right.
Bill and Ted once very wisely said.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us this week. And of course, next week, Johnny will be back unless he has one of these capitalistic pig things going on where some studio forces him to go in. He'll be back next week as usual. We've been doing this over a year. We'll see you for the next year or 3. We enjoy doing it. We appreciate your time. Be sure to share, like, comment. Comments after the show are insanely helpful. Sharing this is super helpful. We're really thankful you're here. And as always, we'll see you on the wires and see you next